she almost did not go. That was the part that would stay with Adaeze Okonkwo long after everything unraveled. The small, ordinary fact that she had stood in front of the mirror in her hotel bathroom at 7:45 on a Tuesday evening in Seoul, told herself the gala was unnecessary, that she already had everything she needed on that wall in her room, and then put on her earrings anyway. Gold. The kind her mother had pressed into her palm the morning she flew out of Lagos 14 years ago, whispering something about a woman who looks like she belongs in a room is always the last one they suspect of taking it apart. She wore a column gown the color of midnight, structured, sleeveless, with a single gold clasp at the collarbone that caught the light like a quiet declaration. Her locks were pinned back, not severe, just purposeful. The kind of woman who looked like she had been to 100 rooms like this one and found every single one of them mildly insufficient. The gala was held on the 42nd floor of the Lotte World Tower, and Seoul glittered below it, like someone had scattered every star they could not fit in the sky directly onto the ground. The kind of view that made you understand why powerful people chose this city. Everything visible, everything controlled, everything beautiful in a way that felt like a warning. Ada moved through the room the way she moved through every professional space, observing, cataloging, never still even when she was standing. She had a glass of champagne she was not drinking. She knew 17 of the 83 people in this room by name, 11 by criminal association, Hamanon 4 by the specific flavor of financial irregularity she had been untangling for the past 8 months. She did not look at any of them directly. She did not need to. She had learned years ago that the most dangerous thing a woman could do in a room like this was to let anyone know exactly how much she was seeing. She found the terrace by accident, or what felt like accident, which in Ada's experience was usually just good instinct, operating below conscious thought. The main hall had grown warm, the kind of warmth that comes not from temperature, but from the weight of too many carefully constructed performances happening simultaneously, and she had slipped through a glass door into the cool, dark air of the 30-meter terrace that wrapped around the building's eastern face. She thought she was alone. She was not, and he was standing at the far railing, his back to her, looking out over the city with the particular stillness of a man who had made peace with something large and complicated and was not yet prepared to discuss it. He wore a charcoal suit that had been cut with the kind of quiet precision that costs more than most people's monthly salary. No pocket square, no tie pin, nothing performative. Just cloth and tailoring, and a man who understood that power did not need to announce itself. He heard her heels on the terrace stone and turned, unhurried. Han Seojun was 41 years old and looked like someone who had spent those years acquiring a fluency in things that could not be learned quickly. Restraint, discernment, the particular intelligence that lives in the eyes of a person who has sat across negotiating tables from the most dangerous people in a room and never once reached for the wrong word. His jaw was clean, his posture impeccable, and there was nothing warm about his first glance except that it was completely honest, which Ada found more disarming than warmth usually was. "I did not know anyone else had found this," he said. Not an apology, just an acknowledgement. "I was looking for air," Ada said. The room was starting to perform at me. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. Close enough. "That is a very precise description of what happens in there," he said. She came to the railing, leaving 8 feet of respectful distance between them, and looked out at the city. Neither of them said anything for a moment. This was the first thing she noticed about him, that he was not afraid of silence. Most people in rooms like this one were terrified of it. They filled it with the names of people they knew, the deals they had closed, the places they had recently been. This man simply stood in it, as if silence were a form of courtesy he had decided to extend. "You are not Korean," he said eventually. "No. Nigerian. Lagos." She paused. "You are not surprised. Your posture when you walk into a room is the posture of someone who learned very early that she would always be the most interesting person in it, and decided to do nothing with that information," he said. "It is a very specific kind of poise. I have only seen it in Lagos women, and occasionally in women from Accra." Ada looked at him then, fully, for the first time. "That is either the most perceptive thing anyone has said to me at a function like this, or a line so good it deserves a round of applause." "It is the truth," he said simply. "I do not do lines. They require too much maintenance." She laughed. She had not expected to laugh. It came out before she could decide whether to let it, which told her something important about the man standing 8 feet away from her. She filed that information quietly and took a sip of the champagne she had forgotten she was holding. "Ada," she said, offering her first name only. "A woman who worked in financial crimes learned to give people the minimum required for conversation and observe carefully what they did with it." "Seojun," he said. And if he noticed she had not offered more, he said nothing about it. They talked for 31 minutes. She knew because she checked her watch when she finally said she should go back inside, and subtracted backward to when the terrace door had opened behind her. 31 minutes about the city below them, about the peculiar loneliness of professional events in foreign countries, about the way Seoul made you feel simultaneously watched and invisible, about a restaurant in Mapo-gu that he had been meaning to revisit for 2 years and kept not finding the time for, about a specific kind of Nigerian pepper soup that Ada maintained was the only thing that could cure a bad day, and that she had been unable to locate in any form in Seoul despite 8 months of trying. He listened the way very few people listened, not waiting for his turn, not building his response while she was still speaking, but actually receiving what she said and turning it over before he answered. It made her want to say more than she intended. "The pepper soup," he said, when she had described it in enough detail that she felt slightly embarrassed. "What would it take to find it here?" "The right person who has been here long enough to know where to look," she said. "Or a very determined search on a day when I am not working." "Are you always working?" She turned to look at the city. "Almost always." "That sounds like a life built for something important," he said, and his tone was not pity, and it was not admiration. It was simply the observation of a person who recognized a mirror when they saw one. Ada said good night. She walked back through the glass door, across the room that was still performing at everyone in it, down the elevator and into the car that was waiting. She sat in the back seat in the dark, and the city scrolled past the windows, and she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. The specific unsettling sensation of having met someone she could not immediately categorize. Back in her hotel room, the evidence wall waited. Ada stood in front of it in her gown, earrings still in, champagne glass long abandoned. The wall was a precise map of 47 shell companies across 11 jurisdictions. Wire transfers traced back through 4 layers of financial fiction, and at the center of it all, one photograph. She had printed it from a corporate filing 3 months ago. Bland, professional, the kind of headshot that revealed nothing. She looked at it now and felt the bottom drop out of the room. The man on the terrace. The man who listened, who did not perform, who knew the specific poise of a Lagos woman and did not use it as a line. That man was Han Seojun. Her target. Ada sat down on the edge of her bed, still dressed, still jeweled, and stared at his photograph for a very long time. Before we go any further, if you have ever had to choose between the right thing and the safe thing, between what the rules say and what justice actually looks like, this story was made for you. Hit subscribe right now and turn on your notifications because this one is going to take you somewhere. We are just getting started." She did not sleep. Ada had trained herself over 14 years to sleep in the way that soldiers and surgeons sleep. Quickly, completely, with the kind of discipline that treats rest as a professional resource. She knew how to turn her mind off the way you turned off a light. But that night, the light refused to go out, and she lay in the dark of her hotel room and made herself review the facts one at a time, the way she always did when she was afraid of what she was feeling. Fact: Han Seojun was the financial architect of one of the most sophisticated criminal networks operating on the Korean peninsula. Fact: he had never been charged with anything, not because the law had not looked. It had looked, repeatedly, carefully, with the full resources of two governments. But because every trail was clean, every signature was a layer removed, every account was nested inside 3 others that were nested inside 3 more. He was extraordinary at what he did, which was why she had been assigned to him. In fact, he had spoken to her on that terrace as if he had nothing to hide. Not the nothing to hide of a man who was arrogant. The nothing to hide of a man who had simply decided, at some point, to be honest in the spaces where dishonesty was not required. Ada got up at 5 in the morning, made coffee, and stood in front of the wall. She had been in Seoul for 8 months on joint secondment with the Korean Financial Intelligence Unit. The task force was led by Director Choi Jung-min, a man in his early 50s, who wore his ambition the way other men wore cologne. You noticed it immediately. It preceded him into every room, and it was slightly too much. He had political aspirations that had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with the kind of press conference that could redefine a career. He wanted Han Seojun's arrest to be cinematic. He wanted cameras and handcuffs and a statement that would trend for 48 hours and land him a ministry position. Ada wanted a case that would hold. The difference between those two things had been a low-grade friction for the past 3 months, and she was beginning to understand that it was about to become something louder. She was at the task force offices by 6:30, which meant she beat everyone except the security desk. She liked the office before people arrived. It was the only time it felt like a place built for thinking rather than performing. She spread the latest wire transfer analysis across her desk and put on the kettle and worked in silence until Choi arrived at 8:15. So he came in with the particular energy of a man who had already decided what was going to happen today and did not intend to spend significant time on contrary evidence. Okonkwo. Status. 4 to 6 weeks, Ada said without looking up. The Jeju account connections are almost fully mapped. When they are, the case is airtight from every angle. 4 to 6 weeks is too long. She looked up then. With respect, Director, 4 to 6 weeks is what is required to build something that does not collapse in court. Choi pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, which was unusual. He was not a man who sat when he could stand and project. This, Ada recognized, was the posture of a conversation that had already been decided elsewhere. "There is pressure from the Joint Committee," he said. "The timeline for this operation has already been extended twice. There are people who need to see results." People who need to see results, or people who need to see headlines? The silence that followed was not a comfortable one. Okonkwo. "I am asking a genuine question, Director, because the answer changes my recommendation significantly. If this case goes to prosecution with gaps in the chain, Seojun's legal team, and his legal team is exceptional, will dismantle it before the first recess. We will have spent 18 months and 2 governments' resources on an acquittal. I would rather wait 6 weeks. Choi looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood up. 2 weeks. Have something substantial for the Joint Committee in 2 weeks. He left without waiting for her response. Ada sat very still. Well, she had been in this position before. The position of a woman who was right about something that a man with more institutional power was not interested in hearing. She knew how to manage it. What she did not know how to manage was the thing she had not yet said out loud. that she had sat on a terrace the night before and spoken with Han Seojun for 31 minutes and found him to be, in an entirely uncomplicated way, one of the most interesting people she had encountered in years. That information was not going in any report. She picked up her pen and went back to work. 3 days later, her phone showed a message she was not expecting. It came from a number she did not recognize. One line. "I know who you are, Ms. Okonkwo. I think we should speak." Below it, a time and an address and nothing else. Ada read it twice. Then she pulled up the registered holder of the number through the task force database, already knowing what she was going to find. Han Seojun. She sat with the phone in her hand for 45 seconds. 45 seconds was an eternity for Ada. She had once made a field decision in 4. But this was different. This was a man who had identified her purpose, and instead of going quiet or running or calling his lawyers to build a wall, had sent her a polite message asking to talk. That was either the action of a man who had nothing to lose, or a man who had something very specific to offer. She typed back, "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Somewhere neutral." His response came in under a minute. The address of a conference facility in Uedo, not his building, not a government building, not anywhere that belonged to either of them. To neutral. As requested. Ada put the phone face down on her desk and stared at the evidence wall. In the center of it, his photograph looked back at her, still bland, still revealing nothing. She thought about the man on the terrace. She thought about the way silence had sat between them, like something offered rather than something imposed. She thought about what kind of person asked for a meeting with the investigator who was building a case against them. She thought, either the most dangerous kind or the most honest kind. She slept very badly for the second night in a row. The conference room in Uedo was on the 12th floor of a building that housed 12 different financial services firms and said nothing particular about any of them. The walls were pale gray, the table was glass, and the morning light came through floor-to-ceiling windows in a way that left nowhere to hide. Ada arrived 7 minutes early, which was intentional. She wanted to be settled before he arrived. She wanted the room to be hers before he entered it. She wore a camel coat over a black blazer, her locks loose today for the first time since she had landed in Seoul, and she sat with her back to the window. Force of habit. She preferred seeing doors with nothing in front of her. No files, no tablet, no recording device. She had made a deliberate decision on the walk over. She would listen first. She would decide what this was before she decided how to respond to it. Seojun arrived at 9:58 with his lawyer, a composed woman in her late 40s named Oh Soyeon, whose reputation Ada knew well. One of the most precise legal minds in Korean financial law. The kind of attorney who never raised her voice because she never needed to. The fact that he had brought Oh told Ada something. This meeting had structure. This was not an improvisation. Seojun looked at Oda the way he had looked at her on the terrace. Directly, without performance, without the particular kind of studied neutrality that guilty people deployed when they were trying to appear comfortable. He wore a navy suit today, no tie, and he moved into the room with the same unhurried quality she had noticed before, as if he had made peace with whatever was about to happen and simply needed to see it through. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I almost did not," Ada said. "Tell me why I should have." Oh Soyeon set a bound document on the table and slid it across to Ada without speaking. Ada looked at it without touching it. The cover was plain. No letterhead. No title. The kind of document that did not want to be found outside this room. "What is this?" Ada asked. 2 years, Seojun said. He had not sat down yet. He stood at the end of the table, hands at his sides. And when he spoke, his voice was level and precise, the way a man spoke when he was delivering something he had been preparing for a long time and did not intend to embellish. 2 years of documented divestment, account transfers, trust redirections, the systematic unwinding of every financial instrument connected to the organization's illegal operations. Shell companies dissolved, fronts converted or closed. Capital moved into legitimate structures under my personal legal oversight. Ada opened the document. She read for 4 minutes in complete silence. The room held around her. She was aware of Seojun watching her, aware of Oh So-yeon's careful stillness, aware of the city moving below the windows in its daily indifferent way. She read each page as she always read evidence, not for what it said on its surface, but for what it confirmed, what it contradicted, what it could not explain. She turned to page 37, then 42. Then she went back to page 12 and read it again. It was real. She knew it with the same certainty she knew all things in her field. Not intuition, but the accumulated pattern recognition of thousands of hours spent reading financial documents, beyond the specific weight of a record that had been constructed not to impress, but to document. This was not a fabricated trail. The signatures were dated correctly. The transfers were sequenced in the right order. The legal filings existed in jurisdictions she could verify independently. The man sitting across from her had been dismantling the empire she was trying to destroy, quietly, without applause, for 24 months before she ever stepped off a plane in Seoul. She set the document down. 6 weeks, Seojun said. The last phase requires 6 more weeks to complete. The Jeju accounts, the Busan property portfolio, and 2 trust instruments that are currently in the process of legal conversion. 6 weeks, and there is nothing left that has not been accounted for. Ada looked at him for a long moment. You are asking me to wait. I am asking you to decide what justice looks like in this specific case, not procedure. Justice. The word landed the way he had intended it to, not as an accusation, but as a question she could not dismiss. Ada had built her career on the distinction between the two, and he had just spoken it back to her in a single sentence. I have no legal obligation to give you anything, she said. No, he agreed. You do not. And if I leave this room and file the indictment tomorrow, your legal team will use this document as a mitigating exhibit that reduces your sentencing range, and the organization will be dismantled anyway, just messily, through prosecution rather than internal collapse. You have calculated all of this. Yes. So why this? Why not simply let it play out in court? Seojun was quiet for a moment. It was the first moment in the meeting where she saw something beneath the composure, not vulnerability exactly, but the particular weight of a person who had been carrying something in private for a long time and was choosing, carefully, to set it down. Because the men who built what I was part of will use a public prosecution to make themselves look like victims of an overreaching government. They will get press, they will get sympathy, they will make it messy and political, and by the time it is over, 3 of them will be free, and the ones who actually ran operations will be untouchable. He paused. My way. The structure collapses from the inside. There is nothing left to defend and nothing left to mythologize. It simply ends. Ada picked up the document. She stood, which was her signal to end the meeting. I will be in touch, she said. She walked to the door. She stopped with her hand on the frame, back still to him. You knew who I was at the Gala, she said. Not a question. I knew within 48 hours, he said. I could have chosen not to contact you. I could have gone dark and let the legal process run. Why did you not? The pause before his answer was 3 seconds long, and Ada measured every one of them. Because I was tired, he said quietly, of doing the right thing as if it were a secret. Ada left the building and walked 2 blocks before she stopped, standing in the Seoul morning with the bound document held against her chest, and allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of something that was not professional composure. 30 seconds of acknowledging that the most complicated thing she had ever been handed in 14 years of this work was not a financial ledger. It was the man who had built it. Wait. Did he just... Yes, he just told her he was tired of doing the right thing in secret. And she walked out of that room with his entire confession in her hands and something she cannot name in her chest. If this story is already doing something to you, and I know it is, hit that like button right now and drop in the comments where you are watching from. Are you in Atlanta, Lagos, London, Toronto? Let us know. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you doing? Hit subscribe, because this is absolutely not the end of what is about to happen. Ada called her sister at 11 that night, which was 3 in the afternoon in London, which meant Yemi would be between school pickup and starting dinner, and would answer on the second ring. She answered on the first. Ada. Yemi's voice had the particular warm precision of a woman who had been listening to her younger sister for 36 years and had long ago learned to read everything in a single syllable. What happened? Nothing happened. Ada. I am working a complicated case. You are always working a complicated case. You do not call me at 11 on a Tuesday to talk about complicated cases. You call me at 11 on a Tuesday because something happened that you don't know what to do with. A pause in which Ada heard the background noise of Yemi's London kitchen, the particular domestic warmth of a life she sometimes envied and sometimes found incomprehensible. Yo, who is he? That is not. Ada. A long silence. He is the subject of my investigation, Ada said. The kitchen sound stopped. I need you to say that again. The man I have been building a case against for 8 months. He requested a meeting. He showed me documentation proving he has been systematically dismantling his own criminal enterprise for 2 years. He asked me for 6 weeks to complete the process, and then said something that I cannot. That I keep. She stopped. What did he say? Ada told her. Yemi was silent for 4 seconds, which for Yemi was an eternity. Then she exhaled in a way that contained an entire editorial. Okay, Yemi said. Okay. I need you to hear me very clearly. You are not calling me because you do not know what to do. Well, you are a woman who has dismantled 3 criminal networks across 2 continents and never once lost sleep about the procedure. You are calling me because you already know what you are going to do, and you want someone to tell you that you should not do it. That is not Adaeze. The use of her full name was Yemi's way of saying, we have arrived at the part where we are done pretending. Ada sat on her hotel bed, shoes still on, the bound document on the pillow beside her, like something she had not yet decided whether to keep. Outside, Seoul glittered in its relentless way. She had been here 8 months, and it still looked like the future. He's doing the right thing, Ada said finally, without being required to, without anyone watching, for 2 years. Oh, and my director wants me to file in 2 weeks for a press conference that will turn it into a political story, and let the men who actually ran operations walk away looking like they were persecuted. And the man who has been quietly fixing it for 2 years? He will be charged regardless. The cooperation is on record. It will affect sentencing. But he will still be charged. So the question is not whether he faces consequences, Yemi said slowly. The question is whether the institution you work for gets to use him as a headline before the work is finished. Ada did not answer. She did not need to. Can I ask you something? Yemi said. Yes. Does any of this have anything to do with the fact that you are calling me at 11 at night and you sound the way you sound? Ada looked at the photograph on the evidence wall, the bland corporate headshot that told her nothing. She thought about the terrace, about 31 minutes, and a man who was not afraid of silence. "No," she said. "Ada." "It doesn't change the decision. Whatever else is, it doesn't change it." "All right," Yemi said, and her voice had shifted into the register she used when she had stopped arguing and started supporting. "Then you already know what you were going to do. Build it right. Build it so it cannot be used as a weapon by anyone. That has always been the only thing you know how to do." After they hung up, Ada sat in silence for a while. Then she picked up her laptop and opened the case files and began, quietly and without ceremony, to rebuild the prosecution strategy from the foundation. Not fast, not political. Right. She did not know, in that moment, not that 2 kilometers away in an office building in Gangnam, a man named Park Jin-ho was reading something he was not supposed to read. Jin-ho was Han Seojun's second-in-command and had been for 11 years. He had the particular loyalty of someone who had attached their entire identity to another person's orbit, not out of weakness, but out of a long-term calculation that had paid off consistently until, in the past 6 months, it had begun to feel slightly miscalculated. Seojun had been different lately, quieter in certain meetings, unavailable in ways that had previously been unthinkable, redirecting conversations about certain accounts with a casualness that Jin-ho knew, from a decade of close observation, was not casual at all. He had said nothing. He had watched. And then tonight, a financial report that should have cleared his inbox had arrived with an attachment misfiled, not by accident, Jin-ho suspected, but he could not prove it. And inside the attachment was a trust dissolution document with Seojun's signature dated 8 months ago. Jin-ho read it 3 times. He pulled up 2 other accounts he had been watching, cross-referenced the dates, opened a 4th file. His hands were very still on the keyboard when he finished. He had not known. He had worked alongside this man for 11 years, and he had not known. The exits had been so gradual, so perfectly timed, so precisely sequenced, that even someone inside the organization, watching daily, had seen nothing but normal operations, which meant Seojun had been lying to him for 2 years, which meant the man Jin-ho had built his professional life around had decided, at some point, to stop consulting him about the most consequential decision either of them had ever made. Jin-ho closed the laptop. He sat in the dark for a very long time. When he picked up his phone, his face was unreadable, which was the most dangerous thing about Park Jin-ho. He was most dangerous when you could not tell what he was feeling. The 6 weeks passed the way consequential weeks always pass, faster than you expect from the outside and slower than you can believe from the inside. Ada rebuilt the case methodically. She worked 14-hour days, sometimes more, refusing Choi's increasingly cold requests for preliminary arrest documentation with a diplomatic steadiness that cost her more energy than she let anyone see. She told him the evidence was being strengthened. She told him the international cooperation elements required additional coordination. She did not tell him about the ledger. She did not tell him about the meeting in Yoido. She told herself this omission was professional strategy and not something else. And on most days, she almost believed it. On the 15th day, Seojun's attorney filed the final dissolution paperwork for the Busan property portfolio. Ada found out through a routine monitoring alert and spent 11 minutes staring at the notification before filing it under ongoing analysis. On the 22nd day, Choi called her into his office and told her in a voice that had stopped pretending to be collegial that her secondment renewal was under review by the Joint Committee, and that the committee's decision would be significantly influenced by whether her work delivered in the projected timeline. Ada said, "Understood, Director," and returned to her desk and worked until midnight. On the 28th day, she ran into Seojun. Not planned, not arranged. She was on a bench outside the financial district's regulatory filing office, eating the rice and vegetables she had bought from a convenience store because she had once again skipped lunch. and he came out of the building's side entrance in a charcoal coat, saw her, and stopped. They looked at each other across the 12 feet of pavement between them. "There is a restaurant on this block that serves jigai that is better than anything you will find at a function," he said. "I'm in the middle of eating," Ada said, gesturing with her convenience store container. "You are in the middle of eating food you bought because you forgot to eat again," he said, and the accuracy of this observation was so complete and so entirely uncalculated that she laughed despite herself. "How do you know I forgot to eat?" "Because it is 2:45 in the afternoon, and that is a container of cold rice from the GS25 on the corner, and you are wearing your coat over your blazer in a way that suggests you left your office quickly and did not intend to be outside for long." Ada looked down at her coat. He was correct on every count. "The jigai," she said. "Is the broth actually good? Or are you saying that because you are being polite?" "I do not do polite," he said. "It requires too much maintenance." She recognized the echo of their first conversation. She filed that away, too. They had lunch. They did not talk about the case. They did not talk about the ledger, or the meeting, or the 6 weeks, or anything that existed in the formal space between them. They talked about a documentary on urban infrastructure that they had both apparently watched the previous week, about the difference between Seoul traffic and Lagos traffic, and whether either of them could be described as traffic in the conventional sense, about the specific disappointment of a meal you have been looking forward to that does not meet expectations, and about what it felt like to spend your professional life in rooms full of people who were hiding something. "Does it make it difficult," he asked, pouring her tea without asking whether she wanted it, "to trust anyone?" Ada wrapped her hands around the cup. "It makes it easier to recognize when someone is not hiding anything." He looked at her. "Is that what this is?" "I have not decided what this is," she said. And it was the most honest thing she had said to anyone in the past 3 months, which told her something about herself that she was not entirely comfortable with. On the 35th day, Seojun completed the Jeju account transfers, the last instrument of illegal capital movement in the organization's financial architecture was redirected into a legitimate holding structure. On the 38th day, the final trust instrument was converted. The organization's financial empire did not collapse with drama. It simply ceased to exist in the way a fire ceases to exist when there is nothing left to burn. No explosion. No announcement. Just a structure that had been carefully, or precisely, completely starved of the oxygen it needed to continue. Seojun sent Ada a single message. "It is done." Ada read it at her desk at 7 in the morning, coffee cooling beside her, Seoul gray, and beginning outside the window. She sat with those 3 words for a long time. Then she picked up her pen and began writing the most precise, most carefully constructed, most legally unassailable criminal case of her career. What Ada did not know, what no one had told her, because the person who knew it had been sitting on the information for 5 weeks, like a man waiting for the right moment to use a match, was that Park Jin-ho had gone to Director Choi 3 days after finding the dissolution documents. He had not gone out of anger. He had told himself, walking into Choi's building in Yoido, that he was going out of principle. That Seojun had been making unilateral decisions about the organization's assets without consultation, and that this was both professionally dangerous and personally disloyal, and that someone with the appropriate authority needed to know. But underneath the principle was something rawer, the specific grief of discovering that a man you believed in had decided to change his life without telling you, and the specific cruelty of watching him do it, cleanly, successfully, while you were still standing in the place he had already decided to leave. Choi had listened to everything Jin-ho said, with the focused attention of a man watching a gift land in his lap. And then he had picked up his phone and called a journalist he trusted. The story broke on a Thursday morning, 41 days into the 6 weeks. Ada found out through a news alert at 6:20 a.m., standing in her hotel bathroom with her toothbrush in her hand. The headline read, "Sources reveal Seoul financial crimes investigation compromised. Suspect allegedly allowed to destroy evidence under investigator oversight." The room tilted. She read the article in full, twice, with the particular stillness of a person cataloging a disaster before allowing themselves to react to it. The article cited no named sources. It described an unnamed investigator who had allegedly received documentation from a suspect and allowed 6 weeks to pass without filing. It used the phrase evidence destruction 4 times, which was both legally incorrect and strategically devastating. It did not name her. It did not name Seojun. But it described the investigation in enough detail that anyone within the task force would know exactly what it was referring to. Ada put down the toothbrush. She dressed in under 4 minutes. She was in a taxi to the task force offices by 6:35. Choi was already there. "Close the door," he said, when she walked in. She did not close the door. She sat down across from him and looked at him with a steadiness that she had earned through a decade and a half of being the calmest person in the most difficult rooms, and said, "Tell me what you have done." "What I have done," Choi said, and his voice had a new quality in it, something that was not quite triumph, but was in the same family, "is ensure that this investigation concludes on a timeline that serves the objectives of the Joint Committee. What you have done is conduct an unauthorized negotiation with a criminal suspect and suppress material information from your supervising officer. I suppressed nothing. I have been building the most complete possible case. Every piece of evidence I have gathered is documented and legally obtained." The meeting in Uedo. Ada went very still. "How do you are not the only person in Seoul with access to financial district surveillance records." Choi stood. "Your secondment ends in 12 days regardless of how the committee rules. The question is whether it ends cleanly or whether it ends with a formal review process. That is in your hands. And in exchange for it ending cleanly, you want me to file the indictment today, before the case is finished, before the 6 weeks are up. I want you to do your job, Ms. Okonkwo." Ada stood. She picked up her bag. She looked at Director Choi Jungmin with the expression of a woman who has just understood something about a person that she will not be able to unknow. "I will file the indictment," she said, "when it is ready to be filed. Not a day before. And whatever formal review process you initiate, I will cooperate with fully, because everything I have done is documented and defensible. Do not mistake my professionalism for compliance, Director." She left the office. In the hallway, she took 3 long, slow breaths, the way her mother had taught her. Not to calm down, but to stay sharp when everything in you wanted to either cry or throw something. Then she pulled out her phone and texted one person. Not Yemi. Not her supervisor in Lagos. She texted Seojun. "There is a problem. You need to know." Seojun read the text in the back of a car on the way to a morning meeting that he canceled immediately upon reading it. He asked his driver to take him to the conference facility in Uedo instead. He sent Ada the address. They met in the same room as before. The pale gray walls, the glass table, the morning light that left nowhere to hide. This time, there was no lawyer. Oh, no bound document. Just 2 people in a room that had started to mean something to both of them, across a table that was more honest than most of the conversations either of them had been part of. Ada told him everything. The news article, Choi's threat, the surveillance footage, Jinho. Seojun listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, looking at the table surface with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not distress, but something that lived adjacent to it. The look of a person processing a specific betrayal. "Jinho," he said finally, not angrily. The name fell like a stone dropped into deep water. You knew he had found out? I suspected. 3 weeks ago I noticed an access pattern on some of the trust documents that was not consistent with his usual work. I should have spoken to him. He paused. I did not, because I did not know what to say. How do you tell someone who has been loyal to you for 11 years that you made the most consequential decision of your shared history without consulting them? By telling them, Ada said, and the quiet precision of it made him look at her. Yes, he said, by telling them. I know that now. I need to ask you something directly, Ada said. Yes. With the article out, with Choi looking for a reason to accelerate this, if I file the indictment today, incomplete, your legal team has a strong case for obstruction of justice on the part of the task force. It would be messy and protracted, but you would likely avoid the worst of the charges. You could walk away from this with relatively little. She watched him carefully as she said it. Seojun looked at her with an expression she had come to understand over the past 6 weeks. The expression of a man who found the idea of moral compromise aesthetically distasteful, like a wrong note in a piece of music that he could not unhear. I told you why I came to you, he said. Nothing in this article changes the reason. Even if it means a subpoena, full cooperation, on record? Especially then. Ada held his gaze. In it, she saw something that she had been trained her entire career not to see in suspects, in targets, in subjects of criminal investigation, because it was precisely the thing that made people make bad professional decisions. She saw a person, a full, complicated, clear-eyed person who had looked at what he was part of and made a different choice, without asking for credit, without asking for a clean exit. She looked away first. I'm going to file the indictment when it is ready, she said. I have 6 working days. I am going to use every one of them. And it is going to be built so precisely that nobody, not Choi, not the Joint Committee, not a journalist with unnamed sources, can make it into anything other than what it is. And what is it? The truth, she said. Fully documented. The least dramatic, least political, a most accurate version of what actually happened. There was a pause, and in it something settled between them. Not the beginning of something, but the acknowledgement of something that had already been there for weeks, looked at honestly, and held at a careful distance by 2 people who understood exactly why the distance was necessary. Ada, he said. It was the first time he had used her name. She registered it the way the body registers a shift in temperature. Not consciously at first, then all at once. When this is over, he said, and left the second half of the sentence unspoken, which was either wisdom or cowardice or both, and which she would think about later on a plane back to Lagos. When this is over, she said, and left her half unspoken too. They walked out of the building separately as they had arrived, and Seojun went to see Jinho that afternoon. It was the meeting he should have had 3 weeks ago, the one he had been avoiding because he did not know how to explain to someone who had given him 11 years of loyalty that he had made the biggest decision of those 11 years alone. Jinho was in the Gangnam office when Seojun arrived. He looked at Seojun the way he had always looked at him, completely, without the polite glancing away that most people performed when they wanted to avoid an honest exchange. Jinho had never been afraid of eye contact. You went to Choi, Seojun said. Yes. I should have told you. 2 years ago, Jinho said. His voice was flat and completely controlled, which Seojun knew from long experience meant that what was underneath it was neither flat nor controlled. You should have told me 2 years ago. Not the plan. Just the fact that you were planning. Just that you had decided. We were supposed to... He stopped, pressed his lips together, recovered. You made me complicit in something I would not have chosen to be complicit in. I kept your secrets for 11 years, Seojun. You could not keep me in the room for the one decision that mattered. Seojun sat down across from him. You are right, he said. Jinho looked at him. Something shifted in his face, the specific frustration of a man who had prepared for a fight and been denied it. That is all you have? I am sorry. I was afraid of what you would say. I was afraid you would try to stop me, and that I would listen to you, which would have been the easier choice and the wrong one. A pause. I did not trust myself to say no to you, and so I did not give you the chance to ask. The silence that followed was long and uncomfortable, which was what made it honest. The article, Jinho said finally. I know. I did not know Choi would. I know, Seojun said again, and his voice held none of the anger that Jinho might have expected, which was perhaps the most disarming thing about Han Seojun. He had a complete inability to hold a grievance when someone's mistake was rooted in human rather than venal reasons. What is done is done. It changes nothing about what comes next. Jinho looked at him. What comes next? I cooperate, Seojun said simply. Fully. On record. Everything. Jinho stood abruptly, walked to the window, stood with his back to the room. When he turned around, his face had the look of a man who has spent 11 years betting everything on a single number and has just watched it come up. You are going to lose everything, Jinho said. No, Seojun said quietly. I already lost everything that matters. I have spent 2 years building something back. The question is whether what I build next is worth the building. Ada filed the indictment on the 47th day. It was 112 pages long. It contained more than 600 individual pieces of documented evidence. It named Han Seojun on 7 charges related to historical financial crimes, all of which predated his 2-year divestment program, and it submitted the divestment record as formal evidence of cooperation. It did not contain a single element that could be credibly challenged as procedurally improper. It had been built, every page, every exhibit, every citation, with the kind of attention to legal architecture that Ada produced when she had something to prove. Choi read it and said nothing. The Joint Committee reviewed it and said nothing. The press, who had been expecting something messier and more dramatic, covered it in 48-point type for one news cycle and then moved on. 2 days later, Ada was informed that her secondment would not be renewed. The Joint Committee had made their decision. She was to conclude her work and return to Lagos within the week. She had known this was coming. She had known it since the morning in Choi's office. She sat with the formal notification for a few minutes, not reading it again, or just letting it exist in her hands with the weight that it deserved. Then she filed it, opened her laptop, and began the comprehensive handover documentation for the Lagos office. This was what integrity cost, not her certainty that she had done it right. She had never doubted that. What it cost was the momentum, the position, the carefully constructed career trajectory that she had been building for 6 years since her first international secondment. It cost her the next step. She thought about what Yemi had said. Build it right. Build it so it cannot be used as a weapon by anyone. She had done that. Whatever came next, she had done that. The morning of her last day in Seoul, Ada was in the courthouse annex filing the final supplementary documentation. The building had a long central corridor on its 2nd floor, gray marble and tall windows, and she had been walking through it for 8 months without ever finding it particularly meaningful. She came out of the records office at 9:12 and turned toward the elevator. He was at the far end of the corridor, on Seojun, in a charcoal coat, moving toward the preliminary hearing room with his attorney. He had been subpoenaed, as Ada had anticipated. He had, through lawyer O, submitted a full cooperation declaration 2 days after the indictment was filed. He had attended every scheduled meeting with the prosecution team, answered every question, provided every document requested. He had done it without theater, without negotiation, without asking for anything in return. He saw her at the same moment she saw him, when they were 40 feet apart on a marble floor in a courthouse corridor on a gray Seoul morning, and neither of them moved for a moment. Not dramatically. Not in the way that moments like this were staged in the films Ada's mother watched on Sunday afternoons, but in the way that two people stop when they arrive somewhere they had not been sure they would arrive. Ada walked toward him. He did not move to meet her. He waited, which was his nature. They stopped when they were 4 feet apart. Lawyer O had continued forward and stood slightly apart, giving them the dignity of a few feet of private air. "You cooperated," Ada said. "You built it right," he said. Silence. Not an uncomfortable silence, the kind of silence that had been their first language on a terrace above a city, and the kind of silence that held things that words were insufficient for. Outside the corridor windows, Seoul moved in its indifferent, extraordinary way, and the morning light came through the glass at an angle that was not cinematic and not romantic, and was entirely real. "I leave today," Ada said. "I know," he said. There were 14 things she could have said in that moment. She had catalogued them in her head over the past 3 days, which was not something she intended to tell anyone. She settled for the one that was most accurate. "I meant what I said in the conference room. When this is over." "So did I," he said. She looked at him one more time. Fully, the way she had looked at very few people in her life, the way she looked when she was not cataloging and not assessing and not building a case, but simply seeing. Then she nodded once, the way two people nod when they have said the necessary thing and have decided to trust each other to hold it. She walked past him toward the elevator. She did not look back. He stood in the corridor and watched her go, and did not pretend he was not watching. Lagos in April was everything Seoul was not. Loud, brilliant, warm in every sense of the word. A city that did not need you to be significant in order to feel significant itself. Ada had forgotten, over 8 months, how the city's particular humidity felt on your skin in the morning, like being held rather than exposed. She had forgotten the quality of the light, which was entirely different from Seoul's light, richer, less precise. The kind of light that made even ordinary things look like they were worth examining. She had a smaller desk now. The Lagos Financial Intelligence Unit had welcomed her back with the quiet professionalism of an organization that understood that people who did excellent work sometimes did it in ways that made institutional politics uncomfortable. She was not penalized. She was not celebrated. She was given a desk, a case file, and the implicit understanding that her career had been recalibrated rather than ended. She was not bitter. She had thought she might be on the flight home. She had given herself 12 hours at altitude to process it. The secondment, the indictment, Choi, Jinho, all of it. And what she found, underneath all of it, was not bitterness, but something cleaner. A specific kind of satisfaction that she had not felt after any of the 3 previous network dismantlements, but because those had been clean and uncomplicated and had cost her nothing personal. This one had cost her something, and she had done it right anyway. That distinction, she was discovering, was not small. Seojun's cooperation testimony had run for 4 days before the preliminary tribunal. Ada had followed it through the legal documents forwarded by Lawyer O, a courtesy that hadn't been required, but had been offered, which she noted. The testimony had named names, provided account numbers, traced 11 years of operations with the same surgical precision that Seojun brought to everything. The organization's remaining leadership had scrambled for attorneys. 3 of them had already entered their own cooperation agreements within a week of his testimony. which was exactly the effect Seojun had predicted. When the financial architecture was already gone, there was nothing left to defend and nothing left to mythologize. It had simply ended. On a Thursday morning, 3 months after she returned to Lagos, Ada was at her desk with coffee and a case file when her phone lit up with a message. The number was saved under a single initial. S. She had saved it the week before she left Seoul, on a morning when she had decided that some information was worth keeping, even when you did not yet know what you were going to do with it. The message read, "The last of the monitoring conditions were lifted this morning. I am building something new. I thought you should know." Ada read it twice. She thought about what it meant, not the legal implications, which she had already mentally mapped, but the fact of the message itself. The fact that the first thing he had done, on the morning his last legal constraint was lifted, was tell her, not announce it, not send a press release or a statement through Lawyer O. Tell her directly. Like a person who had decided that the architecture of honesty they had started building on a Gala terrace in Seoul was worth continuing. She smiled. It was the private kind, the kind she kept for moments that were hers alone, that did not need to be performed for anyone, or explained to anyone, or justified by anything except the simple fact that they were true. She typed back, "I know. I have been watching the filings. The structure looks sound." His response came in 40 seconds. "It should. I had a very good model." Ada put the phone face down on her desk and looked out the window at Lagos in the morning. At the city that had made her, that had sent her into the world with gold earrings and her mother's voice, and the conviction that a woman who looks like she belongs in a room is always the last one they suspect of taking it apart. She thought about clean hands, about what the phrase had meant to her 8 months ago, neat, simple, procedurally correct, and what it meant now. The truth, she had learned, was that clean hands were not the absence of mess. They were the willingness to touch the mess and still come back to something true. They were the decision, made without applause and without guarantee, to build something that would last. She turned back to the case file on her desk. There was work to do. On her windowsill at home, or in the apartment she had taken in Lekki with the view of the lagoon that she had promised herself for 15 years, there was a small clay pot she had bought from a woman at the market on her first Saturday back. In it, something green was growing. She had never grown anything before. She did not know if she was doing it correctly. She watered it every morning before she left for work, watched it with the same attention she brought to financial documents, looking for patterns, looking for what it was becoming, patient in the way that only people who have learned to build things correctly, without rushing them, ever truly learn to be patient. She had not named it. Some things did not need names. They just needed tending. In Seoul, a man she was not yet sure how to describe was laying the first structural foundations of something that had no illegal capital in it, no hidden instruments, no layers designed to obscure. Just work, done in the open, in his name, with clean hands. He sent her photographs sometimes, of blueprints, of construction sites, of the specific kind of morning light that Seoul produced in early spring, before the city fully woke up, when it was just glass and sky and the memory of everything that had been built there. She kept every one of them. She did not know what they were to each other. She had stopped needing to know. There are things that are true before they have a name, and the most important things in a life, the ones that cost you something real, and the ones that survive the bill when it comes due, are usually the things that never needed one. She had given a man 6 weeks. He had given her something she had not known she was missing, the proof that it was possible to be in the middle of something large and complicated and still, in the quiet of it, be entirely yourself. That was worth more than a secondment. That was worth more than a promotion. That, Adaeze Okonkwo decided, on a Thursday morning in April, with the Lagos Lagoon outside her window, and something green growing on her sill, and a message on her phone that she would answer at lunch, because some things deserved not to be rushed. That was worth everything it cost. She gave him 6 weeks. He gave her back herself. And here is the thing. That is not a fantasy. So that is what it looks like when two people who have decided to be excellent at being themselves finally find each other. No games, no manipulation, no one trying to fix the other. Just two complicated, brilliant people choosing the harder, more honest version of everything. If this story moved you, and I know it did, because you are still here, and we are over 50 minutes in, then do something for me right now. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you have not already. Share this with one woman in your life who deserves a story this good. Put us on notification because we have more of these coming, and you do not want to miss a single one. And drop in the comments. What moment in this story stopped you? Was it the terrace? The ledger? The corridor? Was it Adaeze walking back through that door in Lagos and choosing herself? Tell me, because the reason we make these stories is you, and the way you see yourselves in them. We will see you in the next one.